Peter Costello Schools Young Aussies. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Now, contrary to popular opinion, I am not actually a boomer. I'm not even a Gen X. I'm technically a millennial. I'm one of those older millennials that was born right at the beginning of the 80s. So I kind of grew up analog but was exposed to the digital world. But I am one of those annoying millennials. So I thought it'd be interesting to have a look at this article, looking at some comments by Peter Costello, where he's kind of schooling some of the younger Aussies. So let's have a look. Will this be as memorable as the Bolt Special Smashed Ave? Have you gone to a cafe? We went to a cafe the other day. I tell you, taking 6 kids out for breakfast, that was like $120, and service was terrible. I don't think I'll be rushing again to waste money like that. But, you know, look on the, you can tell if how someone's reaction is when you ask for the Bolt Special and they look at you like you got no idea what you're talking about. I am getting old, aren't I? I definitely am evolving into a boomer, at least aspirationally. So, Peter Costello issues a wake-up call to young Australians complaining about house prices. Okay, I mean, yeah, here's the thing. I bet you a lot of the young Australians that are whinging about house prices and inflation and all these things going up in costs are voting for political policies that drive that up 100%. So, Peter Costello said standards have changed. He said young people would rather travel than buy a house. Yeah, I mean, sure. But also standards as in complexity of construction, legal requirements, hoops you have to jump through. They've all changed. We've got the livability standard coming in. Livability changes to the National Construction Code coming in here in Queensland. It's going to affect every house design in the state. And you may think, it sounds good. It's great. All these touchy-feely policies that people are happy for. That's what influences the cost of things. It makes it more expensive. You can't have it both ways. You can't have a bloody socialist nanny state government which dictates every little tiny thing for the greater good and then complain about the fact that you're the one bearing the shared burden, which is house prices. So you got previous generations, they could, sure, they had hard times. It's never as easy as we all imagine, but they got into houses with a lot less bullshit surrounding the entire economy back then than there was now. They weren't forced to lock away their money in superannuation. They could throw everything at getting a house first and get in there quick. And then build another investment portfolio after they got that security and stability. Not anymore, eh? So, Nine's chairman and former federal treasurer, Peter Costello, has claimed young Australians are prioritising overseas holidays over saving for a deposit on a house. Now, I cannot blame anyone at all for wanting to get some memorable experiences, enjoy life, and get some global exposure than throwing everything at a house. Particularly when you feel like it's hopeless. When you see how much it costs. Can you blame people? It's probably smarter to do the live at home and work Macca's jobs on the side from all your other gigs to get into a house. But we can't really hold it against people, can we? Mr. Costello shared his thoughts during an interview with John Anderson, former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia under John Howard from 1999 to 2006. And he's got a really good YouTube channel, everyone. You should check it out if you haven't already. His comments come just a month after a poll found that young Aussies and middle-income earners in Australia have given up on ever owning their own home. Now, this is a big problem. I honestly would argue this is a national crisis. This is more important than The Voice. This should be what we're having a referendum on having, you want your population to own homes. You want them to settle. You want them to have a vested interest and a stake in your nation. Because they're not going to otherwise. Or I guess this is just the conservative perspective of it. If you come from the other side, from the socialist state dependency perspective, you don't want them owning homes. You want to divide and conquer along class. You want more people dependent on you. It's astonishing the number of young Australians who don't believe they will ever have a home, Mr. Anderson said, highlighting the figures. And if they do, it will be through inheritance. They don't see themselves as being able to work their way into it, so they don't feel invested. You've got people who can't start a home. They don't feel like they can start a family with it, and in fact, our birth rate is dropping quite significantly. Yeah, well, you got to step up, lads. Come on, pump out the kids. I'm taking your quotas. I'm trying. For those that don't get the joke, we're expecting our 7th. Oh boy, we went shopping with all the kids to Coles today. That was fun. Mr. Anderson asked Mr. Costello why young people are leaning into policies which were only exacerbating the very things they're worried about. Because they're stupid? He replied, I think when you're young and you don't pay tax, you're inclined to view that whoever else is paying tax should be fixing my problems one way or another. Exactly. As I said, because they're stupid. And until you start paying tax yourself, you don't sort of realize that there's a cost benefit in all of these policies. Mr. Costello said home ownership is very important for young people, but lifestyle choices were coming at the cost of their home ownership ambitions. I wouldn't say it's just that. I'm saying that genuinely homes cost more. They're bigger, they're more expensive, there's more to them, there's more legislation, there's more hoops you need to jump through. They're not making it easier, guys. The only thing the government's been doing is stimulating people to jump in at the same time, which just exacerbates it. They're expecting to live 90 or 100. They're expecting to have 4 or 5 jobs. They'd rather travel than put down a deposit on a house. It's lifestyle, he said. Okay, a trip overseas, what do you reckon, 20 grand? That's not a deposit on a house. A deposit on a house is 200 grand. In Sydney, maybe less in other cities. 60 grand to 100 grand. It's not an overseas trip. You go to Bali, or, we went to Vanuatu, you get away with 10 grand. These aren't the same. Mr. Costello warned that rising interest rates and inflation would come as a shock to many young Aussies. If you're a young person and have grown up in our country, you have not really seen a recession for 30 years, he said. Yeah, he's right. We've not had a recession in living memory. The last one didn't count. That was just free money for everyone. Mr. Costello also admitted standards had changed in the last 30 years. If you go back 30 years, we had much smaller homes, but there were 4 people in them. Yes, no, 100%. Now we've got houses that have doubled in size, but the average household is halved in size. So they're expecting a lot more in standards, he said. Well, my kids will be okay then. They'll be only 1 bunk bed in a room. They'll be spoiled. Mr. Costello said research had revealed that the biggest difference between a secure and an insecure retirement was owning your own home. Yes, 100%. This is why when the Liberals are pushing to allow people to use their own money in their own super to help them buy a house, I agree with that policy. You can live on a pension if you own your own house, he said. Yes, you can. You can. That makes the biggest difference. Sure, it won't be a luxurious life, but it'll be a comfortable one if you're not too spoiled or entitled. If you're still renting at 60, you're going to be under a lot more pressure. Mr. Costello's comments come as a Revolve Political Monitor poll published last month found that young and middle-income owners in Australia had given up on ever owning a home. 2/3 of the 1,609 people questioned agreed that young Australians will never be able to buy a home. Kind of defeatist, isn't it? Jim Reed, director of Resolve, said high house prices and rents meant younger people were being discouraged from entering the real estate market. Many young people have simply given up on the dream of owning a home, at least in their early careers. And some are even telling me that they are giving up on having a family because they can't afford to look after themselves, let alone more mouths, he said. See, this is the media pushes this narrative that kids are so expensive. They're not. Just don't spoil them. Economist Saul Eslake, who has long been a critic of Australia's housing policy, said the situation has become so bad it's undermining the living standards of coming generations. I don't understand why young people today aren't out on the streets protesting against their parents and their grandparents for what they've done to the cost of housing in this country, he said. And because they're wasting their time protesting in meaningless other stuff. They think the world's going to end in a couple of years and they're freaking out about that. It's almost like they're being manipulated intentionally by design, isn't it? You have this whole mass of people who are dependent on the state one way or another, who are terrified the world is coming to an end. And the only way to solve it is through more taxes. It's brilliant. An Australian on an average salary wanting a house is now almost locked out of the inner cities or towns near the beach unless they're prepared to live in a flood zone. Financial comparison site CanStar calculated someone on an average full-time salary of $94,000 would be able to borrow $436,000. That's not much. If the prospective home buyer was able to raise a 20% deposit of $109,000, they would therefore only be able to buy a house or unit worth $545,000. This is the issue. This is why you need two people. Okay? This is pointless. Someone on an average full-time salary, it's meaningless. Who cares about that? You need two people to buy a house. We're not living in the bloody 50s or 60s anymore. If you're married, the wife has to work. Sorry, no, feminist one. Both of them have to work now. You can't have a one-income household with average income anymore. Not possible. The average house is both people working. So that's Australia, guys. So these comparisons are meaningless. So you've got to double that. So it'd be 180 grand. So you're looking at over $1 million. There's the average house price right there. That's less than half. Yeah, I know. It's less than half because they're only doing one person. The average income Australia would now miss out on the middle market house in the more affordable but isolated capitals like Perth. Yeah, I don't care about the average income. That's not important. It needs to be housing affordability needs to look on the household income. Both people come together. Okay? Sure, we read all the news.com articles about some young bastard who worked at Macca's and ate free food and got free rent and everything free from their parents to live there, and that's how they got into a house. Sure, okay. Normal people, you pair up, you have some fun, then you settle down to start a family. It's a couple. It's two people. It always has. But now, they both have to work in a job. Okay? That's how Australia's changed. And we're not going back. Okay. Ex-Federal Treasurer slams the COVID overreaction and claims there was more freedom in Australia during World War II. How do we put up with that? Yeah, well, what was really the one thing with all the lockdowns and everything, we've discussed it here on the channel. We looked at epidemiologists from the past, critical of all of these interventions, famed, respected people. No one cared. The thing that really pissed me off about the whole lockdown COVID saga was Aussies dobbing in other Aussies. I was talking to one of the guys lifting our house up. Fully tattooed bloke, rough tradie. Bitching and moaning because someone had a party up the street and called the cops on him. There you go. That's it. That's real Australia right there, guys. It's bullshit. It's only going to get worse when you have less people owning houses too. Later in the interview, Costello accused Australia of overreacting to COVID and subjecting residents to draconian and unnecessary restrictions. He told Mr. Anderson that governments across Australia went too far when they shut down workplaces and implemented daily curfews. He said not even during World War II had Australians been forced to stay inside their homes past 9 p.m. You look back on it and you say, how do we put up with that infringement on individual liberty, he said. The government has enormous reach. The government has huge media influence. They were running daily press conferences giving out body counts at all times. This idea that if you went out of your house for more than an hour a day, you could die or worse, could infect someone and could die. But somehow if you went out for 59 minutes, you were going to be safe. Australia had one of the toughest lockdowns in the world, with state leaders closing the borders and introducing draconian stay-at-home measure orders for millions of residents. Western Australia closed its borders to the rest of Australia in March 2020, and in April enacted enforced borders between regions in the state. Premier Mark McGowan finally lifted the hard border with other states and territories in March 22 for all Australians and triple vaccinated travellers from overseas. However, it was residents in Melbourne who suffered the longest lockdown, with strict stay-at-home orders enforced for a total of 262 days. Yeah, people can only exercise within 5 kilometres. Yeah, we can't forget this. We cannot forget this, guys. But we will. We will. The average punter won't care. They won't realize. I mean, Victoria also has a Bill of Rights. Remember that? We went through the whole Bill of Rights, the document they put together to all it meant was more paperwork for the bureaucrats so they could ignore it. Well, let's have a bit of a talk about all of this. So certainly some interesting points here, but you can't equate a deposit with a house with a trip overseas. They're not the same. And these articles that are just looking at individual income. We're not in a single income world anymore. Both of you need to work if you want a house. Don't like it? Tough. That's how it is in Australia now. Sucks, sure. It's hard having a family with one primary breadwinner. But that's not what people want, guys. Everyone has to have their career. And then what you do is you put your kids and you get them, educated in the daycare so you never see them. Then you put them in school and you never see them. And then you wonder why they don't even know you. Anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts on this one. It frustrates me. Check out HeiseBim, or Heise does, for other content I create. If you're a fan and want to support us, you can on YouTube or Patreon. Use our referral links, buy our pocket squares, or call us if you need an architect. Take care. Have a great day. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.